the conclusion to Dolmenwood's Winter's Daughter on today's Plays the Thing. Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. Today, we continue to discuss Dolmenwood, the dark and whimsical fairy tale role-playing game written by Gavin Norman and published through his company, Necrotic Gnome. More specifically, this is the third and final play report for Winter's Daughter, which is a starter adventure also written by Gavin Norman for the setting. If you recall, I originally recorded this as one video, but it got too long, so I split it into two separate videos. The first part of the video talked about my setup for this particular game as I wrestled with a traumatic situation that happened in the second session of play. And then this is the result of that setup as I tell you what actually happened in this third and final session. I'll begin with a quick recap. I will then jump right into the play report and I'll reflect a little bit at the end about how I think it went. But before we dive in, if you enjoy this content, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon to get notified whenever I post something new. All right, so let's get to that recap. In the previous sessions, the reclusive wizard Mosselmeyer Druge had hired Cephas the fighter, Mordrin the cleric, Sandy, who's also a fighter, Gwendy the hunter, and Nia the bard to travel into the wood, find the burial mound of the legendary Sir Chide, take the ring from the hero's corpse, and deliver it back to him in Prigwort. Upon arriving at the site, the heroes met another PC, Osbert the friar, who joined them in exploring the mound. In the mound, they encountered various oddities, including the ghosts of Sir Chide's parents, and they finally made it to the antechamber of Sir Chide's tomb, which was guarded by a pair of stone hounds. Sadly, the hounds attacked the heroes and killed Nia, and that created the traumatic experience that I ended up processing in the previous video. This trauma had multiple dimensions. First, Sandy, the fighter, ended up walking out of the tomb in a state of shock when his player, Mario, decided that he was going to bow out for the rest of the session. Mike, who played Nia, was left kind of processing Nia's death and trying to figure out whether or not he would continue to play. And then the rest of the players kept playing for a little while, hoping at first that they could find a way of saving Nia, and then later on just trying to follow up on something that Nia had said before she died, which was that she'd figured out that they needed to find the names of the two hounds in order to bypass them and get into Sir Chide's tomb. Tragically, as they were looking for those names, Mordrin the cleric was paralyzed when she gazed into a magic mirror, and the party hadn't figured out how to break the paralysis. And then right when they were finding the second name, they ended up getting into a battle with these acidic spitting worm creatures, and Gwendy, the hunter, lost her wolf brother Blathe to one of these creatures. That session ended with Gwendy picking up Blathe and running into a room with a pool that had candles floating in it, and she figured maybe that had something to do with the Fae and that maybe they could restore her wolf. So she scooped up Blathe and ran into that pool and disappeared into the Vale. So that was the situation of play that I was getting ready to deal with. By the time I returned Dolmenwood to the table, though, I had another problem, and that is that it had been over a month since we last played, and memories of play had begun to vanish from my players' minds. Also, I had a scattered party, a fragmented party. Sandy had wandered into the woods, Gwendy had disappeared behind the veil, Mordrin was paralyzed, and Osbert and Cephas were the only ones who were actively running around in the tomb. Andrew, Cephas's player, couldn't make the session due to his wedding anniversary, and we had a new player at the table, Jason, who made Lilith, a human enchanter with possible Fae ancestry. In short, I had to reframe the situation to create a suitable launching point for play. And this is how I went about solving that problem. First, I wrote some setup text, which I don't normally do, but since I needed to reframe, I wrote some setup text I meant for Mike initially. I sent it to him via email in the hopes that he and I could kind of play through that one-on-one before we got to the table, but that didn't work out. We didn't have time to do that. So instead, we just worked through it at the table along with everybody else. And that was actually much, much better. Here is the text that I read out loud when we gathered to play. Numb. That's how you felt after the guardian hounds came upon you with blinding speed and pierced your flesh with their gnashing teeth. You doubled back in searing pain, but only felt it for an instant as your consciousness plunged into near oblivion so as to not sense the beasts thrashing your body to and fro. In this state, you hear the muffled sounds of the hounds growling and your friends shouting and then lamenting your death. You faintly sense them cradling your body as they implore you to come back to the living. You realize your eyes are shut and you open them only to find yourself standing apart from your body as Mordrin and Gwendy tend to it. Where are you going? You hear Sepha say behind you. The voice is muted like words spoken underwater. Kid, where are you going? You turn to see Sandy, Stoneface, walking past your body and into the burial chamber of Sir Chide's family. Dazed, you follow his gaze as he passes a shimmering curtain of fluid where Lord and Lady Chide now appear not as skeletons, but as gaunt and fleshy, yet ghostly dancers. They smile at you, then resume their ghostly waltz as ethereal music swells. The patterns of light on the fluid shimmer and swirl like dancers, their movements perfectly aligned with the hypnotic rhythm of the waltz. You sense the music emanating from the cascading fluid, the melodies pulling at your essence, and feel a subtle tug. Maybe it's an invitation? You suddenly feel weightless as your spirit uncouples from its mortal coil. Simultaneously, you hear a scintillating voice say, "The living and the dead are but steps in the same dance, and you, my dear, are poised to take the next. Come closer, feel the rhythm, and tell me, will you take the next step and learn why you were chosen?" So after reading that text, I asked Mike, what does Nia do? Mike replied that Nia felt that dancing like the ghost would rob her of too much agency, but he was cool with Nia pulling out her recorder, her now ghostly recorder, and accompanying the music as she walked towards the shimmering fluid. And then when she stopped before it, she cocked her head and said, "Chosen?" But she didn't receive any response. She tried chatting with the ghost, but the ghost kind of like danced away and she was left in the chamber all by herself. I said, "Is there anything else that she does?" And Mike said, "Well, she's just gonna sit on one of the broken tombs and think and wait." I think she was waiting for another command or another utterance to come from the sheet of fluid, but for reasons, that wasn't gonna happen. So then I turned my attention to Dan, who plays Gwendy. If you recall, the last session saw a grief-stricken Gwendy walk into a pool adorned with floating candles carrying the corpse of her wolf brother, Blathe. Gwendy, I described, wandered through a twilight realm of shifting lights, and she could hear Blade's familiar barks and noises all around her. It sounded like the young wolf was, at least in terms of her auditory senses, like all around her in a kind of a heightened way. After a little while, she emerged into a snow-covered forest where floating candles drifted in the air, and she moved on a bit, and at a forest edge, she saw a white tower standing in the middle of a frozen lake. She approached that tower, tried the doors, and finding them locked, she knelt before the tower, weeping over Blathe. With that in place, I then moved to Jason and Mario. Jason playing Lilith and Mario playing Sandy. And I started with Lilith. I told Jason that Lilith was another member of Osbert's ill-fated expedition who'd been wandering in the woods since the attack on their camp of a few nights ago. And then I described how Lilith ran into Sandy, who came walking out of the woods. Mario at that point took over and explained that upon seeing Lilith, he seemed to come out of a state of shock and his eyes grew wide and he yelled, "We need help, this way," and he ran back the way he had come. Not wishing to be alone, Lilith followed him. And that's when I finally turned to Jen, who's playing Osbert, and Lauren, who's playing the still paralyzed Mordrin. I told Jen that she and Cephas heard the commotion caused by Sandy returning with Lilith. Jen said that Osbert would move to investigate, and given Andrew's absence, I played Cephas and said that he followed Osbert while carrying Mordrin. Consequently, the cleric's paralysis was broken the moment that sunlight touched her, and that meant that we now had most of the characters in a place, all in the control of their players and kind of ready to launch into whatever happened next. And things happened pretty quickly. The larger group of Osbert, Mordrin, Lilith, and Cephas debated whether they should use the names Flager and Cheddar, which they had recently discovered were the names of Sir Chide's hounds, to bypass the guardians of the legendary hero's tomb, which is what they came here for, or if instead they should go and follow Gwendy into the pool that she'd walked into. Osbert expressed concern for the young hunters, so they opted to do the former. Meanwhile, Nia was nearby and she could hear her companions re-enter the tomb and have a conversation and ultimately decide to follow Gwendy, and that spurred Nia's spirit into action. Returning to the room with the scintillating sheet of fluid, she shouted a few more questions, but again received no reply. She then decided to peer into the fissure, and she noticed that it was dark, but way below, in a kind of a surreal way, there was this glimmering light that looked like sunlight reflected in snow. Figuring that she had nothing to lose, she leapt into the fissure and felt pulled into a long, surreal fall as she drifted through the veil and into the Fey realm like a snowflake caught in the wind. I then shifted my attention back to Dan. Gwendy was still weeping before the doors of the tower, but I told Dan that she noticed small splotches of purple slime appearing in the snow around her. Looking up, she saw a purple tear in the sky above her from which the purple drizzle seemed to come, and then she heard Osbert and Mordrin and Cephas calling to her from across the frozen lake. As Gwendy bid them come forward, Nia's ghost landed next to the young hunter, but Nia's ghostly invisibility kept her from her friend's sight. Now reunited, the characters knocked on the tower doors, which opened to reveal Grimmelgridge, a troll, and Griddlegrim, a goblin who rode on the troll's back in a little palanquin. In charge, Griddlegrim asked for the party's wedding invitations. When they couldn't produce them, the goblin excitedly offered to let them in. Each party member ate a mushroom from the pouch he carried on his belt. However, all the party members refused to eat any of the mushrooms, so Griddlegrim ordered Grimmelgridge to shut the door in their faces. At this point, Sandy asked a good question. Why were they even trying to enter the tower? Mosselmeyer Druge had hired them to take the ring off of Sir Chide's dead finger and deliver it to him. He had not hired them to consort with trolls or goblins or other fae. Osbert and the others expressed that they weren't sure they could return through the portal, to which Sandy replied, well, we haven't even tried. And it looked like at this point they were about to just turn around and go back, but then Mike said that he would like to try to have Nia make herself be seen. I said, great. I was just waiting for him to tell me something like that. I had him roll a charisma check. He succeeded, and so Nia suddenly appeared before her friends, much to their alarm and confusion. She then said that she might succeed where they had failed, turned, and walked immaterial through the tower's doors. At that point, the party decided to wait for her return, see if she can pull something off. Inside, Nia found Griddlegrim, the goblin, controlling or commanding a chaotic feast, barking orders at frost elf cooks that took all sorts of delicacies up and down the stairs. Nia then went up to the second floor, where she found a group of snooty elf nobles idly trading barbs as their guards kind of stood at attention around them. And in listening for a while, she learned that these nobles had been hanging around for centuries for a wedding that had never come. And then finally, Nia made her way up to the third floor, where she found the Princess Snowfall Upon Dusk combing her hair. She sang a haunting melody to herself in the mirror. I had a lot of fun playing this scene, Mike had Nia approach the princess humbly and deferentially, averting her eyes and showing all modicum of respect. The princess, for her part, welcomed Nia enthusiastically, bidding her to stand and referring to her as her little sister. The whole time I tried to convey this feeling that the princess was brilliant and beautiful, but otherworldly and somehow terrifying despite her friendly disposition. The princess then explained that she had chosen Nia to reunite her with her one true love, which required that Nia go and bring Sir Chide's engagement ring to the tower. The princess was sorry that this errand had cost Nia her life, but promised to restore it once Nia completed her quest. She then added that failure to complete the quest would destroy both Fae and mortal realms alike. That last part was a lie, but the princess is a little desperate, and I figured she'd maybe try to raise the stakes by saying that. Nia then bowed, excused herself, and returned to her friends. Upon learning what the princess had said, the party agreed to the quest. They returned to the tomb, used the hound's names to bypass the guardians, and met the ghost of Sir Chide. Upon explaining their quest, Sir Chide enthusiastically bid them to take the ring from his finger, and once they did, he disappeared. The party then used the portal to return to the fairy realm, but not before Nia told Sir Chide's parents that their son was getting married. Arriving at the tower, the party had to contend with Griddlegrim momentarily, but then the princess appeared at the top of the stairs, bid the party enter, and ordered the servants to prepare for the wedding ceremony. I had a lot of fun with this scene as well. The snippy, snooty elven guests disapprove of humans, so they looked on in scandalized horror when Sir Chide's ghost emerged from the engagement ring. Looking gaunt and diminished, Sir Chide lamented coming before his beloved in such a diminished state, but she restored his aspect by proclaiming him resplendent. Then the couple turned to reward the party. The princess first thanked Nia and used her rune to restore the bard to life. She then asked the others what they desired most. Sandy desired the outfit of a proper hero, so he was granted a full suit of elven armor and a spear of elven make. Osbert asked for nothing but the right to reopen Sir Chide's tomb as a pilgrimage site, to which Mordrin hurriedly added that she wanted the same. Sir Chide looked at the princess with amusement and said, "They asked for nothing but the right to honor me for my past deeds?" And then he turned back to them and said, "This right, of course, is granted, but you shall have more earthly gifts as well." The princess agreed and gave them several small chests filled with gems worth thousands of gold pieces. Of all of these closing scenes, I probably felt this one the most because Lauren said that Mordrin's real desire was to learn something about her parentage, which might be Fae related. But the training of the nuns from the Pluraltine Church and the shame she might feel at knowing the truth of her origins got the best of her, and so she asked for what she thought was proper rather than what truly mattered to her. When Lauren said this, like everybody at the table was like, "Oh no, that's horrible." It was just everybody felt that as a real kind of tragedy. We'll see how that continues to affect play going forward. For her part, Lilith said that the only thing that she desired was knowledge of runes, so the princess granted her the lesser rune Gust of Wind. Finally, the princess approached Wendy, who, thinking about Blythe, remarked that what she wanted was lost to her forever. In response, the princess gave the young hunter the amulet of Ruvanaith, which Wendy used to wish Blythe back to life. The only one left was Cephas, and Andrew wasn't there to voice Cephas's desires, so we assumed that a larger share of the gems would cover the mercenaries' ever practical desires. So that's it. Almost. I asked the players if they would remain for the wedding, and they said yes, so I had them make intelligence rolls. They all failed except for Lilith, who, during the festivities, fortunately realized in time that the rift that allowed them to travel to and from the Fae realm might start to close now that the rings weren't tugging at each other, forcing the realms to overlap. The party then said their quick goodbyes, made it through the portal, and returned to Dolmenwood, where they set their minds on what they would tell Mosselmeyer Druge, who didn't end up getting his ring. So how do I think it went? To my mind, it went well. It felt good to return to the game after a long pause and have it flow as well as it did. It felt good to tweak the situation to match player expectations, and it felt good to do so in a way that didn't neutralize the consequences of player action or rob the players of their agency. Although we began with a reset of the situation, the reset felt grounded in the situation as written, and it also honored elements introduced by Mike during character creation, and it preserved the consequences of previous player action. It also didn't prescribe a specific outcome. Indeed, the party did come close to thumbing their collective nose at the Fey Mortal romance angle of the whole situation and simply rob Sir Chide's tomb. There is, however, an important thing to point out here, and that's that I navigated this traumatic situation without doing any actual redesign of the system. That means that next time that combat happens in our Dolmenwood game, if we continue to play this game, there could be a whole new slew of character deaths, and this time the situations of play that allowed Nia and Blythe to survive won't be there, so they could well be permanent deaths. So I need to consider what death rules I want to implement going forward. What will I do? The truth is I'm not 100% sure. However, I did stumble upon an option when playing the game Barbarians of the Ruined Earth. But discussing Barbarians of the Ruined Earth and its death rules is a story for another video. In the meantime, I thank you for sticking around to the end, and I remind you that if you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon. It would really help out. And as always, I wish you good health, I wish you good cheer, and I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.